Doing that, if you go ahead. Great. Hey, everybody, Steve Cady here with Randy at BGSU, Nexus for Change, and our Change 2025 conference online series we've been doing this fall. And I'm really, Randy, I'm super glad to get a chance to meet you. I think the world of Vicky, who's going to be doing the session, and I'm just super grateful. I'm a huge fan of Ken Blanchard, by the way. He's one of my top favorites. I would be if I met him, I would be all googly eyed. Um, his work is so important, and it's so simple and direct and so forth. And I think I'm sure he's been a great mentor to you and a wonderful colleague to have. He's made such a difference in people's lives. And your work, as I got to know your work, I think is pretty amazing what you're doing and your impact that you've had on the organization and the legacy you're leaving, and building on the shoulders of the people like Ken and others. I think it's you're doing a great service to many people out there. I think your programs that you're doing through your organization, through the Blanchard organization, are really cutting edge stuff. I've really enjoyed learning more about it as I was kind of getting to know you a little bit better.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, yeah, and so at BGSU we have a doctoral program. It's a professional doctoral program in organization development and change. It's the average age of our students is close to 50, and they have 25, 30 years experience. And they come from all over the world doing the most amazing things in their organizations. They're in every industry you can imagine, in every kind of job you can imagine, and they're all focused on transforming organizations, revitalizing communities, and developing human potential and bringing out the best, a human-centered approach to creating great places for us all to be together where we work and live. And so I'm really honored to be a part of the program, and a lot of our students are here today. Um, so as we jump in, Randy, I want to ask you a question, and this is comes from a passion question. Your passion for doing this work. Oftentimes, we do our work because we are working on a wound that has happened in our life, a crucible moment, if you will, a thing that happened that caused us to say, this is important for me. Many of our students, Randy, are drawn to our program because they want to work on their passion project, and they want to get their doctorate to help them build the skills to take that area and be known for that area within this broader human-centric approach to creating better organizations and communities. And so a lot of them come in and say, the root of that passion is, and something happened. There was a moment in time when something got them. They want to bring some healing to the world, to themselves, and to others. Was there a moment for you that happened, or a time that really got you to say that trust is so important? And could you share that?
Yeah, I would be happy to share. I'm kind of an open book when it comes to that, and I want to just say, wow, what a intimate way to start a conversation. But I love it because you're right, Steve. It gets to the root of kind of our passions and why we do what we do. So trust uh, really became a passion for me, born out of two primary experiences. One is um, my parents divorced when I was 5 years old, raised by a single mom. We were on and off welfare for quite a while growing up. And so I grew up as one of the free lunch kids, at school who would stand in the special line to get
Mm,
the free lunch. And I would go to the grocery store with food stamps. If those of you remember back in the day, there was like actual different currency that you used that clearly identified you as one of the poor people, right? When you paid for groceries with
mm,
food stamps. And so I grew up in um, sort of an insecure environment, not really being able to trust that things would be super stable. And my mom was a wonderful provider, one of my role models. We always had what we needed, but that was pretty much it. So I had this sense of insecurity. And then, so that was one early life experience that taught me about the value of trust, the importance of trust, stability.
Hmm.
And then early in my marriage, my wife and I have been married for 37 years.
That's awesome.
Um, but early in our marriage, probably about year, oh geez, 9 or year 10 or 11, we had a breach of trust in our relationship. And we were really forced, we were at a decision point. Do we
Hmm.
separate and go our separate ways, or do we really double down on what we committed to in the first place and repair trust and restore it? And thank the Lord, we pursued that path, and it made our relationship even stronger and better than it ever was before.
Wow.
And that just really cemented the importance of trust for me. And so when I had the opportunity professionally to get involved in the field of trust, doing research and writing and client work around that, it was just like a natural for me. It was, what my core value of all the values that I have, it's the central one. And so it's, when you're doing what is inside of you, it's like it doesn't feel like work, it just feels
Mm.
like you're just doing what you do.
Yeah.
That's my
That's
story.
that's awesome. And so that influenced you to then choose the path that you're on
Mm,
and to become a thought leader. And I define a thought leader as someone who's willing to step into the space of writing what they believe and know in a way
mm,
that they can scale their knowledge out in the world. And and you chose to do that. And I think it's I have a gift that I give to all of our graduates for our doctoral program, and that is the written word can change the world.
mm,
In fact, it's the only thing that ever has.
mm. Yeah,
And stepping into your thought leadership and your willingness to put your knowledge out there in writing um, is is also the second thing I always talk about is this notion of passive difference making,
mm,
where you're able to passive income is making money while you sleep,
mm. Yeah, yeah,
but passive difference making is when you put your knowledge out there like you have done and putting the written word or a video or a book or something, someone's reading it and it's making a difference in their lives while you're sleeping, maybe
yeah,
or you're doing
yeah,
something else. So
yeah.
you chose to go in that path, and it's not an easy path. I honestly believe that thought leadership writing is more scary than public speaking.
Mm,
I just think most
yeah,
people don't have to write that much, like to put their stuff out there in writing. But I
yeah,
have found with our students that you have to be really passionate, strongly passionate, to be willing to go through the writing, the arduous experience of writing, to put your knowledge and create it. Like you think of Ken and all the work he's done and
yeah.
how he's put it out there and how much of a difference it
Mhm.
makes because we put it out there. Can you talk a little bit about how you stepped into that, your own thought leadership,
Yeah,
and how you sustain yourself? But what have you learned from becoming a thought leader?
yeah. Uh, I agree with you, Stephen, 100%. I've had, people in my organization and others ask me similar questions like, how do you become a thought leader? Like, what's that? And I'm like, well, you've got to get your thoughts out, right? You got to share your thoughts. And how do you do that? You got to write. I mean, you can speak, but, I think writing is the primary way. So for me, back in 2008 or so is when I really started focusing on the field of trust. I started my blog, leadingwithtrust.com. Every Sunday for probably 12 plus years, I wrote an article. I've got over, 400 plus articles that I've written over the last, X number of years. But it was just the discipline of every week, I want to write an article that expresses my thoughts on the world of trust, how it relates in leadership, and not just trust, but sort of all things leadership, with trust being the central theme. And so for me, it was just that discipline of having something that kept me accountable to
Hmm.
having to articulate my thoughts and put it out there in a logical, cohesive, persuasive manner to try to shift people's thinking, or at least invite them to think differently about
Hmm.
leadership or about trust. Um, and so that's what really did it for me was blogging.
Yeah, that's awesome. How do you
And then
sustain yourself? Yeah.
that led to other things, then moving into publishing magazine articles and
Right.
trade, in
Right.
our industries, magazines, and different, avenues uh, of of writing and expressing your thoughts and sharing your point of view.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm curious so how do you sustain yourself with all of that? Like the challenges that come with doing that, the consistency required. Probably people have challenged your ideas, maybe even trying to get people to understand that, hey, this is a great idea. I think this is awesome. And you don't, maybe get the response that you would like to get. And the idea is good. It's just articulating it in a way that all of some people go, now I got you, Randy. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And through
Yeah.
all of that and getting your words out there and getting it to be, accepted and people to be energized or
Mhm.
drawing people in and coming to you and saying, I want to know more about what you have to say. How do you sustain yourself to get to that point? How have you been able to do that?
Well, I think for me, it's trying to approach it with a sense of humility. By no means do I think I have a corner on, what it means to be a great leader. I mean, it's like that's just nonsense if I think my viewpoint is, the viewpoint that people should adopt. So, if people want to disagree with me or say I'm a little off base or Randy, you didn't consider this or what about that? I'm like, wonderful. We have a saying at Blanchard, feedback is the breakfast of champions.
Mm.
So it's like feedback, give it to me. I want to learn from you. I'm just sharing what I'm thinking about a particular topic. Doesn't mean it's the absolute authority. Um, and so I think that's what's really sustained me. I think obviously being part of the organization I'm with, Blanchard, that's our work. That's what we do. So I get to be with clients. That's my job, working with clients, working with leaders in industries, all sorts of industries all around the world, and just getting to walk alongside leaders and try to help them be the best that they can be. And if I have something that can offer them um, that's helpful, I'm being of service. And so that's really rewarding to me.
Have you ever wanted to quit and just say, I'm done with all this? Have you ever had a moment where you said, I don't know. I just want, wow, this is too hard.
Um, I don't think I have, Stephen.
That's pretty
Not
awesome.
not in my work. I mean, there's been particular situations,
Right, right,
like certain client projects or certain, you
right.
know, things I'm working on where I'm like, okay, this is enough. I'm, like I need
But the
to,
passion has always been the central. Your
yeah,
passion, your commitment to
yeah,
trust and this leadership piece, that is what has been most important.
yeah, because I feel like it's part of my mission in life. So my sort of life purpose statement is to use my gifts and abilities to be a servant leader and model God's grace and truth.
That's
And
awesome.
so this is one way I get to do that. It's the primary way I get to do
Yeah.
that. And so to feel so closely aligned with the work you do, I think that's a gift. And I realize that a lot of people in the
Hmm.
workplace don't feel that sense of connection with what they do. But um, from a spiritual perspective, my viewpoint is that this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. And so it just feels very aligned for me to do that.
Do you have any advice? We're going to jump into your topic. I'm just so curious. I just admire what you've done. So I really
Mm.
want to take the opportunity to learn from you and how you've achieved the level of success in living your passion, living your purpose, and finding the joy in it, which I think is amazing. Um, so what advice do you have for people that are wanting to translate and get to create this light? Like you're saying, not everybody gets the chance to do that. So for those that are trying to get there, what might you say to them to
Mm.
encourage them or to help them get to maybe to that point?
Yeah. Uh, I think it's super important for people to do a values inventory, to really think about their purpose. And I'm guessing, based on this crowd, the nature of why we're here, that probably many of the folks here have done that. Like they've, really formally thought about their core values, why they hold those values, what does it mean to them, how do they express those values, and life, not just work, but in life and how they intersect. I think that's really important. One of the favorite things that I get to do with leaders is walk them through a process we call leadership point of view. And it's a structured process where a leader looks back at their life experiences and they look at who were their key leadership role models. Um, what were the life experiences that shaped their viewpoint on what it means to lead? What are their core values? What do those values look like in terms of how they show up in the workplace? And then what are their expectations for themselves and others, the team members that they lead? And they go through this formal process that involves coaching, and they actually write out their leadership point of view. And then the kicker is they share it with their team, with their organization. And when leaders go through that, they are like, first, when they start it, they're like, oh, really? Like this is kind of,
Right.
this touchy-feely stuff, it's like at the conclusion of it, they're like, oh my goodness, that was so powerful. I never really connected how, you know, for example, the way my dad constantly pressured me to be top of my class and be the high achiever, how that shaped the way I'm showing up with the people I lead, or or I had this neighbor who took me under his wing and he was like the wise mentor, that taught me all these great leadership lessons. And it's so powerful. And when they share that with their team members say, wow, Kim, now I understand why you do what you do as a leader. Or Jay, that makes a lot of sense. That connects with how I see you show up, and it gives people so much more insight into who we are as people. It's just so powerful. So I think, to sort of bring it back to your
Yeah.
question, Steve, it's like when you go through an intentional process like that,
Yeah.
it really helps crystallize why you do what you do.
Right. So being
And it,
intentional, and it's interesting. Uh, a lot of we're coming into the new year, and people say don't have New Year's resolutions because they never get done. And people say,
yeah,
I don't believe in that.
yeah,
However, what you're saying, and I do believe that vision boards and the research on visioning and being intentional and explicit and writing down and giving uh, concreteness to what I aspire to be and who I am. I have the
yeah,
same thing. I have my own intentional point of view version for
mm,
me, and it's made a difference in my life. I think what you're saying is it is important to do that, to be
yeah,
intentional and explicit and write it down.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Shout out to my friend Ryan who joined us here. He's
Hey
my
Ryan,
brother from another mother.
that's awesome.
Uh, Thanks,
That's
Ryan,
cool.
for your comment in the chat there.
All right, one last question before we jump in. This wolf is dancing behind you.
Yeah,
He's just dancing around, almost like it's looking over your shoulder. Yeah.
yeah.
How does that wolf relate to your leadership point of view?
Well, it's because I'm constantly hungry like a wolf. Little Duran Duran call out there. Anybody remember the song Hungry Like a Wolf?
Yeah,
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 yeah. Now, in all seriousness, I've always had this affinity for wolves, and I know it's because of a few different things. One, wolves mate for life, so when they choose a mate, they're with that mate, for life. Number two, wolves operate in a very cooperative group, right? A very cooperative society that the survival of the pack is tantamount to individual survival.
right.
So I like this group teamwork, trusting thing about the wolves. But yet, wolves also have this solitary nature, kind of the old lone wolf,
Hmm.
idea. And it's not uncommon for, single wolves to, roam for hundreds of miles, when they're marking out their territory. And I feel like I sort of have that duality in my person that by nature I'm more introverted. So I need time alone to recharge and like, just when I've had a day of facilitating with clients, clients are always like, oh, come on, Randy, let's go out to dinner. We're doing this. And I'm like, I'd kind of like to just go back to the hotel, and like have room service,
Yeah, right, right.
But I see you nodding your head, Jillian. You're like, yeah, right on. We'll go back to the room. Um, so I've got this weird duality of both wanting to be alone, but just loving the connection that I have in groups. So that's
Yeah,
what
thanks.
has attracted me to the wolf.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful drawing. I really like it. So, well, thank you. So, let's transition. So, we were talking earlier about how the book cover, keeping it simple and the simple truths, is kind of
Mm.
consistent with that, and how you came to creating the cover and creating the book. Um, so, tell us a little bit about how you came to create the book, and then tell us a little bit about the content that's in the book.
Yeah, so I've worked with Ken for 29 years. And so for a long time, we had talked about collaborating and working on a book together. And and we had fits and starts over the years where we would kind of, start something and then put it on the shelf, and both of us would get busy with other things. But it really came together during COVID.
Hmm.
One of the benefits of COVID was, ta-da, we're all sitting at home, right? People weren't traveling. We weren't doing hardly any client work. We were still doing
Right.
some virtual training and stuff. So that afforded us the opportunity to really um, just put it together. And in typical Blanchard fashion, Ken has been a mentor. I would say I'm a disciple of Ken Blanchard, in the field of leadership development. We like to keep things simple, practical. And both Ken and I shared the philosophy that although leadership is a complex field, meaning there's lots of different variables that are involved in being a good leader, we don't have to overcomplicate it. We're often the ones that get in our own way. We overcomplicate things as leaders. So we said, with his focus on servant leadership and my focus on trust, what are some simple truths we could put together to try to just keep leaders focused on the basics, the simple truths? Because I think we could all admit the simple truths are what we keep going back to.
Correct.
We
Yeah.
live in a complex world, lots of change, right? All this stuff going on, but it's the simple principles that we keep going back to that are the North Star, right? The true north of our compass. So we uh, just worked to sort of consolidate a lot of work that each of us had done in previous areas and pull together the simple truths, and that's how it came to be.
Awesome. You want to share a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So I wanted to share four. There's 52 simple truths. By no means are they in the entire encyclopedia of leadership simple truths, but they're key ones. And I thought four are really applicable to this idea of change. So before we even jump into the simple truths, we want to do a poll. So Lisa has got a poll for us. It'll pop up here in just a moment. I want to get your input. So let me read these to you before you select. I want to know, how is the pace of change affecting your current role or organization? Option A, change? Huh, I haven't noticed anything. Or second choice, I'm experiencing some change, but nothing out of the norm. Or change is frequent, but for the most part, I'm keeping up. Or the last option, change is constant and I'm struggling to keep my head above water. So we'll give you a moment to select your choice there.
That, and it just reminds me of the article that I'm working on right now on the space in between, right? And I'm talking
Ah,
about
yeah,
how the pace of change and the emphasis on speed and always staying
yeah,
active and keeping
yeah,
moving, and it's
yeah.
almost as if you try to slow down or pause, it's seen as a weakness.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, Theo, what's the option between the last two? If you had to state it, what would it be?
I don't know. There's days where I'm keeping up for the most part, and then there's other days where I'm like
Yes,
like I'm drowning.
yes,
And that
yes,
feels at the moment that feels like 50-50.
yeah, yeah. So we can probably close the poll here, Lisa, and share the results. I, I think. All right, there we go. So one out of the 12 folks who responded said, yeah, you know, I'm experiencing change, but nothing out of the norm. Everyone else is like, yeah, change is frequent. It's happening fast. And as you said, Theo, either there's days where I feel like I'm kind of on top of things, and there's other days where it's like, what's this world come to, right? It is moving so fast. And has anybody heard of this new thing that's on the scene in the last couple years? Artificial intelligence, right? This like, like, wow, that's not having any impact on things, right? So I have felt like, and most of the clients I work with feel like our world, especially over the last 5 years or so, has shifted from, change was kind of this relatively normal process, of going from point A to point B, to now change looks like that image on the bottom, right? It's like we're all over the place. Like today the strategy is X. Who knows? 3 weeks from now, the strategy might be Y, and we're taking a left turn, instead of a right turn. And one thing I know that has become evident to me in my experience is that during times of change, people have a few common questions and thoughts. One is, am I safe? Right? Like, how am I going to be impacted? Am I safe? Like, are the leaders of our organization thinking about me, individually, or are they just thinking about, the organization and how are we going to make more money or achieve our goals, right? Whatever that is. And I know that people are thinking, can I trust you? Right? Can I trust that you've got a handle, senior leader, whoever that is? Do you have a handle on this? Do you have an idea of where we're going? Do you have a plan? And here's one other thing I know. During times of change, for most people, anxiety grows. When we feel the ground is shifting under our feet and we're uncertain, we get anxious, right? And we're wondering what's going to happen. And trust becomes so important. there's surveys. One of my favorite surveys was done by YPO, the Young Professionals Organization. If anyone's heard of that, give me a thumbs up if you've heard of YPO. Um, they did a survey of like over 1,500 leaders worldwide across like 14 different industries. They asked the senior leaders, and this is C-suite leaders, is stakeholder trust critical to the success of your organization? Something like 98.3% said yes, it's critical to the success of our organization. They asked him a follow-up question. Do you have specific strategies in place to build and maintain stakeholder trust? Only like 30 some percent said, yeah, we've actually got a plan. Trust tends to be one of those things that most people don't really think about until when? When does trust usually come on the scene and we realize its importance?
When
You can
it's
feel
been
free to,
breached.
when it's been breached, right? When it's not there, and then suddenly it's the issue. And so during times of change, we have to really be conscious of the trust that's in the system, right? What is the trust we have within interpersonal relationships and organizationally? So here's a few of the simple truths that I think apply to the dynamic of trust during times of change. So simple truth 44 in our book says the most important part of leadership is what happens when you're not there, right? The most important part of leadership is what happens when you're not there. Trust takes root when people feel empowered, not monitored, right? Monitoring leads to ideas of, you don't trust me. Like you're watching every little move I make. High control leadership weakens people's confidence. Whereas I and Ken Blanchard as a whole, we come from a servant leadership perspective that we as leaders are here to help you be the best that you can be. And we want to trust and empower you to do what you think is best in service to our goals and mission as an organization. So I think people really need to know that we believe in them. When we're in the leader role, that we believe in them, that we trust them to act responsibly, um, and that we're sending that signal of, I know you can handle this, right? So our absence, our physical absence, whether it's in an in-person environment or virtually, so much um, more true virtually, is that your performance is or I should say is our performance and success as a leader is marked by your performance as a team member. And we trust you to do your best and to be capable. So, what does that look like on a practical basis? I think it's leaders setting clear boundaries, setting the focus of here's where we're going, here's what we're trying to achieve. A book recommendation for you that comes to mind when I think about this is the book is titled Call Sign Chaos. Call Sign Chaos. It's written by Jim Mattis, General Jim Mattis, who is a well-known figure. And he talks about the importance of a commander's intent. That's what it's referred to in the military as a commander's intent. I rephrase it for the organizational world as just leadership intent. Are people clear on our intent as leaders? And that's our leadership intent is made up of two parts that Mattis talks about: the why of the strategy plus a clear picture of the end state. What should that end state look like? Clear why, the reason, purpose behind it. What's the end state? What's the end goal? It is not dictating how you get from that why to the end state. It's giving you some parameters, right, for you to work in to achieve that end state. So I think that's really important um, for us as leaders. Feel free to, I'm monitoring the chat. Feel free to, pop in with questions. We've got a small enough group here that we can have some discussion around some of these things. So feel free to chime in if anything comes to mind. Aruna, did you have a comment? I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I'm finally not traveling and so I can actually talk. I put all my thoughts in the comments, but one of the things that really is a challenge, I think, in today's workplace is a lot of HR systems are designed, unfortunately, I've always thought about feedback being the breakfast of champions, but HR systems don't allow necessarily always for that to be used effectively. And so therefore leadership becomes a real challenge. I've been in the field of org development and HR my entire career. And I've always struggled with where, there was the shift to performance management where it was feedback for improvement. And I've seen the shift back again now to feedback being more for, I hate to say this, a paper trail or to make the case for, low performers to be exited out of organizations. And so, when you think about collectively all of the different aspects of leadership, of organization, and of growth, the concept of servant leadership is one that's very difficult to execute for executives and leaders because there's too much of pressure for KPIs and goals to be met. And, they're literally given a mandate. I need 5 headcount from your team, or I need this much headcount from your team. And then they have to figure it out. So we can talk about trust in all of these different aspects, but to be honest with you, it's really, really hard. And you're seeing this in all of the headlines across every single publicly traded company with the number of layoffs being created by AI. And so this topic is especially critical, is my comment, because it's hard to be a servant leader and to graciously, even when you're a leader, separate employees when you're given no choice.
Yeah. That is thank you, Aruna, for those comments. That is such a difficult challenge. Couple thoughts. One is that I think of trust dilemmas. Leaders have trust dilemmas. On the one hand, we have to maintain trust with the organization and its stakeholders to achieve results, right? I mean, that's why we're in business. We have to achieve results. We have a saying at Blanchard, no margin, no mission. We're a very mission-driven company. Like we would give away stuff for free. That's our heart's desire. But then we can't run a business, right? Giving stuff away for free. So you have a commitment to uphold trust on this side, but then you have the dilemma of also not wanting to violate trust and uphold trust with your team members, right? With employees. And so you're caught in this dilemma. And it also makes me think that one of the myths of servant leadership is that it's the soft, warm, kumbaya style of leadership, right? No, that's a myth. Servant leaders value both results and relationships. I don't think it has to be an either or. I think it's an and. And I think the challenge for us as leaders is how do we manifest that and mentality, right? And that comes to life in all sorts of things. Yeah, Lisa, fluidity. It's having clear expectations from the start. It involves being willing to have honest and hard conversations but do it in a kind and compassionate way, right? And viewing this as we're in this together, and sometimes we have to make hard decisions. And if we do have to make a decision that sort of lets someone has to lose their role or something, we do it in the most compassionate, human-centered way that allows that person to move on and also having been better for being part of your organization. And it is so hard. I don't pretend to have any easy answers, right? This is hard. It's hard stuff. Yeah, empathy and compassion. I agree, Aruna. Sarah, you have a comment or a question?
Yes, it's actually Sarah. I was just curious
Sorry.
if it's okay. You would have no way of knowing. Um, I was curious to know whether yourself or in the Blanchard organization, any work has been done on trust violations and trust repair.
Yeah,
And because sometimes, this Simple Truth 44 talking about when you're not there,
yeah,
maybe sometimes it's a blessing when your leader's not around
yeah,
because of how they behave. And
yeah.
so I'm just curious to know, has research been done in that area as to like, because I have groups when I do, work in my practice that they're like, yeah, but like, how long to fix this? And I'm like, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
Years.
yeah,
So I'm just wondering if you have some data around that and what you've seen kind of in your work.
yeah, yeah. What a great question. And wow, we could have a whole separate session on uh, restoring trust, right, in organizations. Um, so without getting too off track, Sarah, I will say that, yet here's another myth of trust. We've all probably heard the same. Trust takes a lifetime to build and just a moment to break, right? We've all heard sayings, right, along those lines, right? Well, my thought in response to that is, well, if that's the case, the trust probably was not that strong to begin with, right? Sometimes that happens in the most egregious breaches of trust, right? Like fraud, corporate malfeasance, those sorts of things. The most common occurrence is trust is eroded little bits at a time. Just like that hillside, right? That few rocks crumble here and there, soil falls down here and there, right? We don't notice it, it's imperceptible. And then, boom, one day it all falls down because that last little boulder that was holding something in place finally fell down. And that's the way trust often gets broken. And there is a process. There's a process that you can go through depending upon the severity of the breach and what the situation is to restore trust. And if both parties are willing to engage in that process and put in the work, it is possible. Um, but I'd be happy to connect offline, Sarah, and share some more detailed stuff, and we can talk about that. I'd love to connect one-on-one. All right, let me share this next simple truth. Before I share this simple truth, let me ask you a question. When you think of trust, what is the opposite of trust? What are your thoughts? What is the opposite of trust? Feel free to come off mute and share or type it in the chat. What? Deception? Okay. Thanks, Kim. What else?
I think of fear.
Fear? Yeah. Yeah. Distrust? Yeah, right? Like, well, if we've got trust, then distrust or mistrust must be the opposite, right? Here is something that is super important for leaders to understand. The opposite of trust is not distrust, it's control. The opposite of trust is control. And why is that? Trust and risk go hand in hand. You can't have trust unless there's something at risk, right? Whether it's you're risking your time, your love, your money, your faith. You have to extend trust over that chasm of uncertainty, right? With the positive expectation that your trust will be rewarded, and the other person will prove themselves trustworthy and reciprocate.
Yeah, Randy, can I
Ernest
say?
Hemingway,
Yeah, I was going to
go
say
ahead.
it's really fascinating because it just reminds me of the research, and it's extensive on stress. And the biggest predictor of stress is control,
Mm,
perceived control, like
yeah.
perceived lack of control.
Yes. Yes. And so what do we do, Steve and others, right? When we have this fear of trusting or this fear of making that leap, we resort to controlling behavior, right? We want to play our cards close to the vest. We want to keep information, right? Close and contained, right? We put people on a need to know basis, right? David, you're on a need to know basis, and right now you don't need to know, right? I'll let you know when you need to know, when I choose to open up my area of control. Yes, Anthony, because when we are in control, we are less vulnerable. So, in times of change, we have to remember people are already feeling uncertain, right? They're feeling a lack of control. So, what can we do as leaders to show that we trust them, that they actually have more control than maybe they are thinking? What can we do to empower, right? Let's break that word down. M, to embark, to give, power, right? Trust from the leadership perspective says, I'm I'm willing to open myself up to being vulnerable to you. I'm willing to trust you with this information, with um, resources, so that you feel more secure and can contribute in a meaningful, positive way. Go ahead, Steve. You
I was
have a
going to
comment.
ask, and so when leaders are feeling a lot of stress, they are perceiving a lack of control on their part.
Yep.
So what they're trying to do is take control to
Yep.
reduce their stress level,
Yep.
which then has this ricocheted
Unin-
effect on the people that
Unintended
they're trying to control,
consequence, right? Yep.
on the people they're trying to control,
Yep.
which the people are trying to control are now feeling controlled. Therefore, they don't have control. So now they're not
Yes.
feeling trust. Now they're struggling to get
Exactly.
more. They're fighting for control, but there then becomes, yeah, and the passive aggressiveness and stuff like that.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Which is a perfect sort of tee up for Simple Truth 46. People don't resist change. They resist being controlled. They resist being told to change, right? Change is a part of life. We as living beings, we are constantly changing. We're learning, we're growing. So, one of the myths of change is that, oh, people hate change. Well, people have different reactions to change, but when people are given the choice and they have a voice in the process, they have a sense of control over the change, they're much more willing to get on board, right? One of our other simple truths in our book, which I didn't include in this presentation, is this fun little truth. Those who plan the battle rarely battle the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Those who plan the battle rarely battle the plan, right? We believe in a high involvement approach to change. Get people involved in the early stages of change. Help them craft the plan. Help them come up with the solutions,
Mm-hmm.
because then they feel in control of the goal, right? They're going to be less prone to push back against the plan that they actually helped create, right? Because we all want to be in control. Absolutely. Locus of control, Jay. That's not all. giving people a vote in organizational life is not always possible, right? Like that's kind of chaotic to say, we're going to have all 500 people in the organization vote on which direction we should take. But people can have a voice. So I like to say, even if people don't have a vote in the change, they can have a voice. We can work really hard at giving people a voice in the change and where it's going. Our job as leaders, especially at the senior level, is to set the vision, chart the course, right? Like, here's where we're going. And then I believe we have to work with our teams to help craft the plan of how we're going to get there. So I think that's an important truth to keep in mind, that ways that we can give people control, a sense of control, and not just a sense of control, but true control in how the change is unfolding and evolving, we'll be better off for it. Any thoughts or questions on this idea of control?
The one that came to mind for me was the gap between having real control and the sense of control that leaders can. It's not leaders can be doing a lot of things right, and sometimes there might be some people that are working for them that they're giving control to them, but they don't have a sense of control. So they have control when they don't realize it, and that comes into that learned helplessness. And those kinds of concepts where people, when you give someone the opportunity to change a situation, they don't even see it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And when a new leader steps into a new role and they're in an organization where a leader has had a lot of control and created a lot of learned helplessness, how does that leader step in, start giving control back?
Yes.
Or giving control, even though people don't have a sense of control, even though they have control.
That's right. That's right. And that's not an overnight process.
No.
You have to work at that, right? You have to help sort of re-infuse people's sense of power and control in their own roles, their own lives. And that's, taking baby steps of those little trusting decisions. I think every interaction we have with someone, I call them moments of trust. Moments of trust. Every interaction we have with someone is a moment of trust. Are we building trust in this interaction, or are we eroding trust? We're rarely standing still, right? So all those interactions that we have with folks as leaders, how are we instilling a little bit more sense of trust between us and that individual's sense of self-trust, building their own competence and commitment in the work that they do?
I have a slightly different take on that. And it's especially in the age of AI, because I have seen this. I recently left IBM, which is a huge global tech company. And when I talk to my colleagues who are still there, a lot of their feelings are, I'm training the models. I don't know if I'm going to be here more than a year. So sure, you can have trust, but no one knows whether they're going to have jobs and roles. So to be very honest with you, sure, they can take control. They can do a lot of things to feel in control. But reality is, with the rate of change and the pace of change, there are no answers or guarantees anymore.
Yeah, I do not disagree with you, Aruna. I do not disagree. The ground is shifting rapidly right under our feet, and we're all figuring out how this world of AI, either helps us or hinders us, what that ultimately means for us. And to the extent possible, I believe we as leaders need to provide as much certainty as we can, yet also being very transparent and forthright with people.
Yep, I don't disagree with that at all. I absolutely agree with that. I mean, to be very honest with you, AI is replacing, and I think especially for us in the field of org development, we know this. AI is replacing a lot of what is called automated processes. But the reality is, large language models and all of the AI that's available, most people associate ChatGPT, they hallucinate. They're not optimum. Everyone wants to think they are replacing everything. But the reality is, in our field of org development, the one thing that AI can never replace yet, it's going to take a lot of time, is human empathy, critical thinking, communication, listening. And so our roles in change and as leaders are critical. But the reality, unfortunately, is, and I've experienced this through my entire career, is when organizations need to cut costs, where do they cut first? Training, development, leadership, change, because there's very difficult ways in which you can prove, unfortunately, how you are showing outcomes, how you're showing productivity, and how you can measure them. And it's just the reality, unfortunately.
It is. It is. Believe me, coming from the training and development industry, right? What's the first thing organizations cut when budgets get tight, right? It's like, oh, thanks, Blanchard. We'll just put a little pause on the work we're doing with you until we figure out what's, happening with the economy, or, how's AI going to impact the number of team members we have in XYZ group, right? And sort of one of the primary ways I can keep moving forward is to stay true to my mission and belief that organizations still come down to us, the people, right? And I'm pro people. Just to put that out there, in the world of artificial intelligence, I'm pro people. It comes down to people. Yes, AI is reshaping lots of different things. And, as long as I can still have a voice and do things, I'm going to be pro people and advocate. Yeah, I know we're in similar company. We would all not be here if we didn't believe in the role of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me share the final simple truth that I had for you. Oh, thanks for that comment there, Jillian. I'm going to check out that article. Here's simple truth 47. People without accurate information cannot act responsibly, but people with accurate information are compelled to act responsibly. You've probably noticed a theme in all of these simple truths as it relates to change, is this whole trust and control dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we are into control as leaders, what do we want to do? We want to keep a tight lid on information, right? Usually it's with good intent, right? Like we don't want people to, get exposed to early thinking and come to conclusions that, we haven't even come to, right, as leaders, or we don't want people to get the wrong idea, or, we want to get the plan fully baked as much as we can before we start sharing with people. And when we do that, it actually works against us, right? Because in the absence of information, people make up their own versions of the truth. And it's more often negative than what reality truly is. It's the way we're hardwired as human beings, right? We're looking for threats in our environment, and in the absence of information, we perceive more threat than we do opportunity. And so my encouragement to leaders is share information as transparently, as frequently as possible, and share it with the expectations of, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, here's what I think may happen, but no promises that this is going to happen, right? But I'm including you in my thinking because I think most people, if we, if our leaders share what they're thinking, if I share what I'm thinking, what I'm planning, the information that I have, more often than not, people will probably come to some pretty similar conclusions, right? If we're all looking at the same stuff. So, that encourages me to just be a little more transparent and include people into my thinking so that they can see the likely direction we're heading. And, do that with clear expectations. Not saying that, you're just you're just sort of dysfunctionally transparent, that you're sharing every single wild thought that comes into your brain about what might happen, but modeling psychological safety with people. I think psychological safety is so important. I call it a kissing cousin with trust, right? It's like they're both so interweaved and so closely connected that leaders admitting, I don't know yet, or I don't have the answer, but I'm willing to explore this with you, and together we'll find the answers. We'll chart a course forward. I think that goes a long way towards helping people move with change rather than pull apart from it.
So, Randy, I have a question for you. So, when you think of the last 200 years in terms of organizational structures,
Mm-hmm.
we organized into this industrialized form of organizations for factories and just really
Mm-hmm.
mechanized, Tayloristic approaches.
Yeah.
And it served a purpose for a while,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so now we're in this new era. We're figuring things out, and this idea of how we interact with information.
Mm.
Up until recently, um, this mechanistic mindset, really we see it in the classroom with the industrialized or the factory model of teaching, which you have kids sit in rows and aisles and talk when spoken to. And I've been looking at the research lately, and there's been research that kind of really supports this notion that brain development early on in the classrooms with our kids has led to us also creating organizational forms. And I'm just curious if you're like, to what degree do you see organizational forms where that's kind of the row and aisle mentality, do as you're told, and that's the control piece, right? And all that kind of stuff kind of falls into that. What I'm finding and what I'm seeing, and I have an article, and maybe Teo can put it in there, on being quintessentially human, the AI
Mm-hmm.
imperative, which really
Mm.
talks about how what we've done is we've basically put people in this kind of mode of passivity with information, how they interact with it,
Yeah.
that they don't engage with it. What it does is over time, it shows, like there's two studies I cite in there, that like people, the prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop because of the education piece. Then once you get into work, it actually atrophies,
Mm.
and it leads to cognitive decline like by
Mm.
60%,
Wow.
by the age of 70 in rote work environments where your
Yeah.
people are not being taught how to engage with
Right.
information. Okay.
Right.
And it
Right.
leads to a 33% increased risk of dementia and other cognitive diseases,
Yeah.
Alzheimer's and so forth.
Yeah.
So when I look at what you're saying here, this notion of people compelled to act responsibly with the information, we have a lot of people that have never been put in that position before. How do
Mm.
leaders share information to create an environment where people more civilly and thoughtfully engage with information and disagree?
Yeah.
Because the other problem with this prefrontal cortex reducing is the fact that people don't self-regulate. They are more
Mm.
impulsive, don't
Yeah.
set goals well, and they have a problem. They get into a fight or flight state, the amygdala hijacking.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so I'm going to go, I'm a leader. Here I am. I'm going to start sharing information, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, but people don't know how to engage with it. So
Yeah.
what do you recommend to leaders for how to retrain people to be in this information sharing space?
Yeah. Wow. Interesting ideas there, Steve. Yeah. Well, we can solve that in the next 45 seconds if you want. I mean, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I threw a big whole, but I think that's at the like. How do you actually do that?
Yeah.
Like what?
Well,
Like what's you know?
here's here's where I see a connection with trust. It how can I let me okay. Ernest Hemingway said the best way to find out if a person is trustworthy is to trust them. One of the truths about trust is that it cannot, trust cannot begin to grow until one person first extends trust, right? We're at a stalemate until one person takes that risk and extends trust. And so I think um, in leaders have to find practical, yes, Sean, leaders go first. Leaders have to find practical, tangible ways to start extending trust, in this case, with information, right? Sharing things with people to help them develop their own critical thinking skills, right? Their own prefrontal cortex abilities, as you were describing, Steve. And um, I think a lot of leaders don't want to do that because it's the trust control thing. It's risky to do that. So think back in spring of 2020. What happened in the spring of 2020? COVID came on the scene, right? I I thought, the years of 2020 through 2023 or so as the great trust experiment, because literally overnight, what happened? Organizations sent most organizations, right, where they were able to send their people to work from home. Work was suddenly distributed. Leaders didn't have the ability to see people coming into the office and monitoring their comings and goings and, all that. What happened? By and large, all the reports showed productivity either stayed the same or rose for most organizations. There were these health and wellness benefits of people feeling like they had greater work-life integration. And it was this idea where they were forced to relinquish control and extend trust. And so much of our organizational systems in life have been built on the bedrock of distrust,
Mm-hmm.
right? Think about our governmental systems, our organizational systems. They're built to protect us from those who might take advantage, right? So we're going to not trust people and force them into these parameters. And I think this backlash of the return to office mandates that we see from a lot of companies, it's that, okay, now we can get back to normal, the old ways, right? I can be more in control and we're going to rein things back in. And it's this human dynamic I feel that we're struggling with is trust and control.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm a fan um, of appreciative inquiry and sort of the ideas of group consciousness and the learning that comes together when we bring people together, right? And we learn from each other and we draw out versus the industrialized notion of learning, right, Steve? I'm the sage on the stage. I'm going to tell you what you need to know, and you just sort of remember what I told you to. Hey, let me ask some really thought-provoking questions and sort of,
Right.
weave in what we're learning with what your experiences are. And I think the more that we can apply that to organizational life, the more flourishing it becomes. And trust is a central part of that, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm trusting you to come to this with good intentions, with the true desire to learn and produce and be a, a generative part versus being someone out there to take advantage and take. And so therefore we have to regulate and control
Right. Yeah.
things are happening. Right. I
You
mean,
know,
it's like,
yeah, that's fascinating. And so, and we'll transition to wrap up here with some questions around the field. But you know, what leaders don't realize is that they are sitting on an opportunity to create competitive advantage.
yeah.
And what I mean by that is the best and the most sticky learning. So for those of you who don't know the book, Make It Stick, it's a really good book. I don't know, Randy, if you haven't seen it, I would.
I haven't read it. I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, it's really great. Now, the reason it is, and there's also the notions of flipped classrooms, but the adult learning theories really come into play right now. And when you look at scaffolding, there's three of them: scaffolding, problem-based learning, and situational learning.
Mhm.
So situated learning is learning in service of the task. Okay, I get a task, and now I have to learn in service of. That's the best, stickiest, most effective learning that we can do. But it's also the best way to lead in an organization. Can you imagine a leader that says, okay, we're going to shift the culture of this organization. And you got to start with the top and start with the leadership team agreeing that they want to actually live these principles, which is we're going to engage the organization and give more information. We're going to ask them to have input on the decision making. We're going to ask them to be compelled to act responsibly with this information, come to meetings prepared to discuss, not be reported to on information, but get information ahead of time, come to a meeting, and then what we do is you help people know that we're going to do that. And the next phase is we're going to teach you the skills for engaging with this. We're going to teach you the skills for how we can debate this, and we're going to learn together how to live in this new place that we want to shift the culture here. So I think it can be an intentional process, and I think this is a really important truth that you're sharing here.
Yeah. Wow. So I love these kinds of discussions and meeting with you. Can we do this again next week?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it brings up so many great ideas, right? Like I've been reading articles recently on the role that technology is having. I'm sure you're all familiar with this, lowering our attention spans, right? People are doing less reading, less writing, less cognitive
Right.
development,
Engagement,
yeah,
cognitive engagement, and so forth. Yeah.
cognitive engagement, and it's dumbing down our society, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like people don't have the patience to read a book or even, a 5,000 word article,
Yeah.
on a website. They want,
Crazy.
what do? We type it into AI. Give me a 2 paragraph summary of this, right? And we think, oh, now we're educated on a certain topic, right? We're conversant in a certain topic. And we're, our brains are wired for the path of least resistance.
Right on. Yeah. So,
We're calorie conscious machines. We want to conserve energy. So the path of least resistance is
right
what
on.
we're going to do. And we actually have to do the opposite to really engage our brains to work and
Right.
think. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we can do that. Let's get together again, and we'll send it out, and let's just dive into a bunch of topics, man. And let's just throw some
That'd be
stuff out
awesome.
because I
That would
love
be
this.
awesome.
So we're going to need to shift to wrapping up. And Teo, if you could put in a link for people to the article, but also to the or Lisa, the article on Quintessentially Human, but also the session I did
That's
a few
done.
weeks ago on this series on that will make it easy for people to click on it. Because Randy, I went into it in pretty good detail. And so, Lisa, if you could bring David, Randy, and myself into the video forefront, that would be great. And then, so we're going to jump in. And Randy, I'd like you to meet David Bright, who is at the one of the former chairs, I think, is it chair of the division,
Yeah.
the ODNC division.
Yep.
And he's a dear friend, as well as we're collaborators around looking at talking to people like yourself around some foundational concepts for the field of ODNC, because we are committed to taking the field of organization development and change and helping it to professionalize more so than it has been. and help to codify knowledge. But we're starting with a broad swath of just asking people like yourself some questions, and then we're going to kind of move through an iterative series of building foundational knowledge and professionalization types of things like certifications that are really well informed by evidence-based research and other things around programming and education and so forth. With all that being said, the field of organization development and change has many definitions. People often say that there's no one definition. Everybody has their own. However, there's probably some themes. I'm curious, what is your view on what is organization development and change to you, and how has that evolved in your perception over the years?
When I think of organizational development, I think of the merging of systems and people. How can we get organizational systems and people to work together holistically that allow both entities to not just survive, but thrive, you know?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
that,
has that evolved over the years to you? Has that relationship, has that concept, is it recent? Is it old? Have we come to that? How has that concept evolved over the years?
um, well, in my thinking, it's evolved um, really with the focus on the people side. To me, that this is just my personal perception, is with that role of trust, which is my focus area, is I I I sort of, if I paint a picture, I see a picture of organization, people, and trust is this thing in between and the foundation underneath, and how do we um, leverage trust to make those work together? It was, I think it was Warren Bennis who said, trust is trust acts as the glue that holds the organization together, as well as the lubrication that makes it work smoothly.
Gotcha. Yep. Yeah, that
You
makes
know,
good sense. Yeah.
and so um,
Yeah.
I don't know that it's personally shifted for me over time. That's sort of just kind of the way I've always looked at it.
Yeah, I think things are a lot more consistent than we realize around
Mm.
this notion. So, how do you differentiate the field of organization development and change from other human-centric fields such as human resources, talent development, IO psychology, even project management or change management? Solely focused change management or project management. How do you differentiate this field of OD&C from those? Do you?
I think of OD&C more of the macro level, where those other things are more micro functions or disciplines within the whole.
Okay.
HR is focused on the people and the processes related to people and processes, and talent development's focused on, learning and developing the competencies and skill sets that we need in organizational life, and so on. But in my mind, I picture OD as kind of the bucket, the container that all those things sit in, and OD
Yeah.
sort of works across all those things as well.
Gotcha. That's well said. Yeah, I appreciate that. So, David, you have a question you want to ask?
Yeah. As you think about the field of ODC and your familiarity with its foundations, who are some of the historical thinkers and if you were to
Mhm.
describe the original influencers, people that anybody who's introduced this field should learn about, who would
Yeah.
they be?
Well, a few of the names, which, this is once again not my core area of expertise, but I've learned of them through my own education and my practice, is the national training labs and the work around T groups. Some of our founding associates at Blanchard were involved in a lot of that early work with T groups and sort of experiential learning within groups. Um, I like Edgar Schein's work on organizational cultures and leadership. Um, you know, Kurt Lewin, you know, his work I think of, and Chris Argyris, are big names. I also like sort of more modern day, you know, I love Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety. Margaret Wheatley, although I'm not super immersed in her work, but as it relates to kind of the appreciative inquiry side and group consciousness, I think that's really interesting. So those are some names and figures that come to my mind.
Okay, great. Anybody else from more of a contemporary perspective that you would highlight?
Yeah. Uh, I don't know that it's so much OD, but leadership is my bailiwick. Of course, Ken Blanchard, um, and one of the foundational books for me, before I even came to Blanchard, when I was getting my bachelor's in business management, we used Ken's textbook, Management of Organizational Behavior. Uh, Ken and Paul Hersey co-wrote that book. And, it's a great survey of like all these influential thinkers, in the field of leadership and organizational dynamics. Um, I'm a big fan of Patrick Lencioni's work, in a more practical sense. I think he does a lot of easily relatable work um, in that area. Um, well, those are kind of the ones that I think of.
That's good. So I'm gonna to wrap up closely to on time. This has been so much fun. I could stay so much longer with you. And again, we'll do it again, and we'll
Would love
find
to.
something else to dive into. Maybe
Yeah,
maybe we'll do something around that. We'll talk about that at the end here. But so there, what I want to jump into is some competencies. I think one of the things
yeah,
we've really looked at is there are scholar competencies and then there
yeah,
are practitioner
yeah,
competencies.
yeah.
Now, here's the thing. Unique to this field, the human-centered fields, as you look at
Mm,
scholars and you look at practitioners of organization development and change,
mm.
what would you say are some competencies that scholars need to have to do well, to do their work well in this area of OD&C? And what are some competencies, what are your top competencies that practitioners in OD&C need to have? And it's two different. I mean, obviously there's some overlap, but are there some unique competencies that each set needs to definitely have to do their work well in this field of OD&C?
Hmm. Well, let's see. I think on the scholar side, I think of, inquisitiveness, curiousness. Um, I think, um, I'm trying to think outside of the typical, like research based and, some of
Hmm.
those things to more human centered qualities of like human appreciation. I think on the practitioner side, and I think this is probably true for both practitioner and scholar, is, you know, self-awareness. I think, gee whiz, like, man, if not just leaders, but if just all of us as people could be more self-aware, you know, awareness, emotional intelligence, awareness of our own thoughts, attitudes, feelings, and those of others, and how that, you know, prompts the way we think. I think systems thinking, being able to think about the whole and how parts work within the whole is really important because it's so easy to get, kind of think your one particular area is like the thing, that is the key to all success. And I don't think there's any magic silver bullet, right? It's like you've got to have the whole systems macro approach. So I think those are some things that come to my mind.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. And I think and some people have said even in the past, a few people we've been asking have said things like scholars need, if they're going to do this work, you got to be in organizations to do the work.
I
You
think
can't just
it's,
be doing it like, over here. The scholars
yeah,
in this area really need to get in and do it with the people and really get engaged with it, and really listen to people out there that are doing this work and really wrestle with it. You can't do it in
Yes.
isolation and in
Yeah,
some kind of other place, you know?
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It's being able to take the theory and combine it with real world practice,
Yeah.
right? Like there's got to be a blend of that.
Yeah.
And so whatever research you're doing and the great theories that are being worked on, like also what does that look like on a day-to-day basis,
Right.
you know,
Right.
in the trenches? Yeah.
Right on. Like, yeah. So we should probably wrap up, Dave, and go right to the final questions you want to ask so we can go ahead and
Okay.
wrap up.
If you were to define the ultimate purpose of the field of OD,
Mm,
what would it be? What does it contribute to the world when at its best?
mm. I think it's creating organizations where people thrive, you know, would probably be the most simple. Creating an organization where people thrive. I think far too many people walk into organizations and they check their spirit dies at the door. You know, their spirit dies at the door. I'm showing up here to put in my 8 hours, do my job, and then I'm going to get on with my real life, you know. And it's like, no, our organizations can be so much more. Organizations should be a place where we don't just go to survive and, you know, make enough money to then to live our real life. It's no, we can thrive in organizations. So that's that's what I think the big purpose of OD is. Create those places where people really thrive, where it brings out human flourishing is a term that comes to mind, you know.
That's David's favorite word.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
He sent me a private message in
It's
Zoom,
his
said,
favorite word.
Randy, be sure to mention human flourishing.
That's right.
He didn't.
Actually, thriving and flourishing.
That's how I met
Oh,
Dave.
cool.
He,
You guys aren't
he,
supposed to be pre-coding the qualitative research
That's
like that.
right.
Come on now.
David, I met
So
David. Yeah, go ahead, David. Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, before we finish I would love to hear your perspective on the outcomes when that ultimate purpose is achieved.
Oh, wow.
What are be the indicators that we're
Yeah,
hitting it?
yeah. I think some indicators would be a sense of fulfillment, sense of purpose, greater sense of fulfillment, greater sense of purpose, greater sense of contribution, um, greater well-being, you know, and I'm sure there's ways, you know, you all are the academics, you could figure out ways to measure all those
Right.
different variables, right? But yeah, those would be things: purpose, well-being, meaningfulness, contribution,
Yeah. So Randy,
passion.
one quick question I have for you. You think about all of those items when you in Blanchard particularly. You talk about
Mhm.
the margin is the mission.
There's no
What are the
mission
key?
without the margin.
There's
Yeah,
no mission without the margin.
yeah.
So what are those key margin indicators that you all are on mission, and those important margin indicators that you think are connected to this for you all in Blanchard?
Yeah, well, you know, of course, like all organizations, you know, when I say margin, I'm thinking things like, you know, gross profit, you know, revenue, you know, net income, all those financial measurements enable us to pursue the mission, which is to unleash the power and potential of people and organizations for the common good. So we've got to do that um, in a smart business way so that we have that margin to allow us to fulfill our purpose, which is all about helping people thrive and flourish in the workplace. We
Right.
sort of our little tagline is we help leaders have better days at work, right? You know, we help people have better days at work, and
That's right.
it's all about doing that.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, so thank you.
My pleasure.
I'm
Thank you.
inspired. I want to do a session. I want to have a conversation with you about the bio and psychophysiological aspects of how this work and what you're advocating. What are the implications of that for the biophysiology and psychology of people. I really believe that we can make more of a physiological and biological case for this.
Mm,
Richard Boyatzis does it really well in his work,
yeah.
and so forth. But I think there's more out there and more is emerging. And in the talk that was put on that I did a few weeks ago, I started doing research in the impact of brain rot, with kids and technology. And brain rot was the number one word in 2024. But the role of technology and how we're engaging with each other, with people and technology, and how we're creating these organizations where we have more information, how we're engaging, all of this, and trust and control, all of that's directly related to some really important biophysiological and psychological impacts on people that
Yeah.
are not just interesting, they are compelling and in some cases scary. And if we take charge of it, can be exciting and inspiring.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be fun to just dive in
Oh, wow.
in a few
So
weeks.
interesting. Yes.
Would you like to dive in and just have
Oh,
a conversation like
sure.
that?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
we'll just,
By no means am I an expert in that area, but yes, I would
we can
love
make
to.
connections. We'll just share. We'll bring
Yeah.
people in and we'll just share. I know
Yeah.
this, you know that, we know this, and then we just start throwing it into the pot of soup and we see what we kind
Well,
of mix
yeah,
up.
I think of like the neuroscience of trust. Paul Zak has
Yeah.
done work in that area, and the role of oxytocin and all this stuff. But yeah, that'd be fascinating.
Cool. And your dog is super cute. There's a lot
Oh,
of
thank you.
there's a lot of dog lovers here. That
Yeah,
dog's ear, he's got very inquisitive ears.
I have two dogs and they've both been barging in, letting me know that it's past breakfast time and they're hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for your time, Randy, and everybody out there. Thank you for taking your time with us today. This is our last and our culminating series for the Change 2025. Super grateful. Grateful for all of you being a part of it and all of our frequent flyers out there that have been part of this. And Randy, it's just been such a pleasure to spend time
Thank
with you
you.
today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure to start my day off talking with all of
Yeah,
you. So
that's great.
thank you.
Well, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Randy.
Take care, everyone.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.